And from the cloud came a voice, "This is my beloved Son, listen to him." We can listen in a lot of different ways, can't we? We can have selective listening, where we hear what we want to hear. We can kind of close off our ears so that we don't hear anything at all. We can be very just selective about listening. It's kind of like the 92-year-old man who went to his doctor, and the doctor told him that he should get a hot mama and be cheerful. Well, the next day, the doctor ran into the man walking down the street, and the man was walking with this beautiful young lady on his arm. And the man said to the doctor, "Thank you so much for the advice you gave me yesterday." And he said, "Well, what advice was that?" And he said, "You told me to get a hot mama and be cheerful." He said, "I said no such thing. I said you have a heart murmur and you better be careful." Sometimes we can hear what we want to hear. But Jesus says, the voice of God the Father says, listen to him. And listening to God, how do we do that? Here at Mass, we have an opportunity. Every hymn, every prayer, every reading, all the Eucharistic prayers, all the songs, even the silence, are opportunities for us to listen to Christ. So many times we say, "Lord, what's happening? Something's happening to us. Why is this happening? Or what am I supposed to do?" We should say, listen to Christ. What would he say to do? And usually we'll find an answer. If we are trying to understand things, we say, "God, I just don't understand why this or that is happening." Reminds me of the story of the two blind men who were trying to describe an elephant. And one of them grabbed a hold of the elephant's tail, and he said, "Oh, I think an elephant is like a rope." And the other one grabbed a hold of his leg, and he said, "Oh, I think an elephant is like a tree." Well, neither one of them were really describing an elephant because they couldn't see the whole picture. God sees the whole picture. And that's where we in our trust have to come and listen to what God's telling us to do. We don't see the whole picture. We would like to, but we can't. When Jesus took Peter, James, and John up the mountain, it was a tremendous experience. Jesus, it says, his clothes were dazzlingly white. He appeared transfigured before them. He was giving them a glimpse of what it would be like when he rose from the dead. He knew that they were going to have a terrible time experiencing his death and all that he would be going through. And so they'd have something to remember to encourage them. He gave them this apparition of what it would be like when all that was over. It certainly filled them with hope. And it says, though, even in the end, they still didn't understand what rising from the dead meant, because that was so much out of their experience. But Jesus was giving them that opportunity. And of course, Peter says, "Lord, I'll build 3 tents for you, Mount Moses, Elijah, and me, and we can stay here forever. I just don't want this moment to end." But Jesus says, no, we have to go down and do these things first. We have to do this first before we can be here forever. I may have shared this with you before, when over the years when my family was all together for some celebration, usually a happy occasion, like the day of a wedding or a baptism or a birthday or a graduation or whatever it might be, and it was time to go home, my mother would always say, "I just don't want this moment to end." And we would kind of mock her out, because it would take her 30 minutes to say goodbye to everybody. But she was right. She just didn't want that moment to end, a moment of happiness. That's what Peter, James, and John experienced with Christ. When my mother died, I said to everybody, now she can say to the Lord, "I just don't want this moment to end." And it never will. It never will. When we're in heaven, that moment of joy and happiness will never end. And so that's what Jesus is getting them ready for in the gospel. And in Lent, he gets us ready for celebrating Easter, when we will have again a renewed joy at the fact that Jesus, after his death on the cross, rose from the dead. and promises that we too will rise one day. But in this season of Lent, we need to listen to Jesus. A priest friend of mine told me this week that he was going to suggest to his people that they perhaps in the next 5 weeks of Lent take the time to read all 4 of the Gospels. Now that might sound kind of a monumental task, but St. Mark is kind of short if you started with that one. But just to take a few minutes, the Gospels are not that long, really. But to take some time and just start with one of the Gospels and read the whole thing slowly, from beginning to end. What could Jesus be saying to you? Because that's his word. When we read the scriptures, something happens to us. God speaks to us. And if between now and Easter you read all 4 Gospels, it could maybe the Lord would speak to your heart in a way that you have never experienced before. It's a suggestion that you might take up. But in any case, we want to heed God the Father's words. This is my beloved Son. Listen to him. Really listen to him with your whole heart, with your full attention, and understand what he's saying to you.